Hi guys, Chris and the Ultimate Recycler. Welcome back to the channel. My quest continues to empty my storage shed and the clutter in this shed. I said in a recent video that I'd probably do the first thing I trip over. I did trip over this welder the other night in the dark and took some skin off my leg. It's got to go. It's an old welder that I've had for many years. I've got two others and I don't do much welding anymore. It did work, but I've considered taking it to the shop and selling it. They don't sell on eBay. I've seen them for $30 and still not sell. I've seen them at clearing sales and only get a $10 bid, probably for scrap metal. So they're not that saleable. The other thing is I can't actually lift this thing. I had some help to put it on my bench here because my shoulder's still recovering and this weighs a lot. So we're going to scrap it out. I've got to make a decision. That's part of my cleaning up process, is that I'm not going to allow myself to move one box to another spot. I'm going to deal with it, make decisions. I think there's a secret in that for cleaning up. We're going to scrap it out. So with welders, even though it's a fairly old one, it's probably 1960s, I believe they often have aluminium windings, which would be a bit of a disappointment because I'm hoping to get some good copper out of it. Assuming it's worth, as a welder, if we find someone to buy it, it might be worth $30, $40. If it is a copper one, we might get that sort of value out of copper. And I can use the wheels off it, and we've got the actual leads as well. They'll be copper. So we're going to scrap it out. We're going to see what value we get. Ultimately, if it turns out to be an aluminium one and it's disappointing, it doesn't matter. I've still dealt with it. It will still be all scrap metal and recycled. I will still use the wheels. So there's nothing going to landfill in this, but we'll see what value we get out of scrapping out this old peerless welder. Now, I don't know what this thing weighs, but it's sure a heavy brute. I would estimate about 60 kilos maybe. I don't know. Maybe we can weigh up the sum of all the parts at the end and get an idea, because I can't lift it to weigh it now, and I can't find the scales, the little platform scales I had. So we'll start scrapping it out. For a start, we're going to, I think I'll actually not scrap the actual, what do they call it? The handpiece? The electrode holder. Even though it's a bit tight, and it will have some brass or copper in there, but it's probably still a usable piece. So we might just chop the cord off that, and that can go in the shop. We might get $5 back on that. So there's some value straight up. I'll cut the cords off. I'm pretty sure there'll be copper in the cords, and the power cord is actually a very heavy gauge one. So as you can see there, and it's got, you know, the wiring needs attention anyway. So it's certainly not worth trying to sell. Even just the effort for me to clean it up and get it to the shop really outweighs what I would get back for it. Plus, I've got to find somewhere in the shop for it. So it'll make a good scrapping video. Fingers crossed we get some good copper out of it. But even if it is an aluminium transformer, we do have some options about selling, and I'll go through the prices as we pull it apart. All right, let's chop the cords off first. These knobs may be handy, we might be able to sell those. It's amazing what people have a use for when you present things for sale in the shop, even the big one off the top. And the terminals off the end of these wires will actually be copper. And the wire, it's a fine braid wire, but it's definitely copper there. So there's another knob on the front here, which should unscrew from there. And we've got to make some sensible scrapping decisions as we go. I don't think that earth clamp is much good. It's pretty average condition. It's had lots of welds on it, and the clamp here is very dodgy. So we'll cut that off. And I think that can just go in our shred steel pile. It's definitely copper here. It's fine braided wire, but it is copper. And the little terminal, I think we'll find is copper as well. These ones usually are, so we'll take the tape off that and snip that one off. And even though that's got some solder in it, it'll still go as number 2 copper. And we're not going to strip this wire. It can go as insulated copper wire. Now, I just tried to undo this in the vise and it wouldn't come off. I had a feeling that would smash if I kept trying, so that can just go with the other knobs, and we'll make a bulk lot to go in the shop there. Now, I'm just coming up to another decision. I was about to cut this handpiece here off, but I thought the actual cable's pretty good. It's a nice long length. I don't think the cable is going to be worth enough to warrant cutting it off and just selling this for $5, whereas as a lead with a handpiece, we could possibly get $20 for it. So I might just try and weigh it up and just see how much I think the cable will be worth, and then we'll know which way to jump. So if I kind of take the weight of the handpiece off it, just sort of a bit of guesswork here, but it looks like we've got around about 1 kilo of insulated wire. So to sell that as scrap, we're only looking at about $3, $3.50. So even if I just put $10 on this handpiece and cable, I think it's much more saleable that way and will get better value than scrap. So quite often parting out things is much better value than just scrapping. You've got to always keep in mind that scrapping is the lowest value. If we're not going to sell the machine as a welder, we can sell parts and get quite a lot of value. So if we get $10 for that, maybe $5 for the vintage knobs here. The wheels I have a use for, but we could possibly get $5 a pair if we wanted to sell them. And suddenly you've got more than what you could get for the whole welder. And we've still got, hopefully, copper inside. So to get into the casing, it looks like it's actually got rivets, pop rivets. So I'm going to have to drill those out, and then I think the actual case will lift right off the top and we'll be able to see what the internals look like. Okay, the panel at the back here looks like it might be probably to access the, whoops, where the mains cord goes in. Yes. Oh, there's big chunky transformers in there. We'll get in there in a minute. There's probably some big chunky spiders as well. Let's just cut the wires for now. Okay, the heavy mains cord can go in our insulated copper wire pile. Better take the plug off. And now we'll punch these rivets through and we should be able to lift the cover off. I have the rivets out, but it's really not wanting to budge. I think the whole cover lifts up off the top. There we go. Any wonder this thing's heavy. Have a look at the size of that transformer. And all the framework is really heavy gauge steel. They certainly didn't make it with weight being a consideration. Now I need to find out if they're copper or not. So let's try and get the top cover off. We have some nice brass posts here where the terminals went to. So it looks like the transformer is actually clamped each end. So we might have to get a little bit of spray lube on those nuts and try and undo those. And the whole top will come off, and then we'll be able to lift the transformer clear. I wonder if we can leave the wheels on this little trolley thing. It might be handy. Although the top cover's got to come off and the handle's actually separate. Alright, we better get our socket set out and start dismantling. A little bit of spray on the threads first. Let's hope we don't wake the spiders up. The threads are a bit long for my sockets. It won't reach. Well, at least it will, but I won't get the drive on the top. So it looks like we're going to do a ring spanner. These bolts undid surprisingly well considering how rusty they were looking. So that's good. It didn't take long to get them off at all. So I'm thinking the entire top now will lift off. Let's have a look. So will it lift off? No. What's holding it? Oh, of course, the big wires. And they're such heavy gauge wires that they've really anchored the top. So we're going to have to cut through those. And then we should be able to access the transformer much better. Oh, they are thick wires. I certainly hope they're copper. Let's have a look. Bends like copper. Yeah. Solid piece of copper. Excellent. Okay, now will we have success? Oh, not quite. There's a cross piece going under some wires. We're going to have to cut more wires. Geez, those wires were hanging on. I had to use some tin snips to get through them. But I think we're right to go now. Oh, it's caught on the front. There we go. Wow. Alright, we've got to rescue a bit of copper off the back of this. And the top panel doesn't appear to be steel, it's like a plastic. And it looks like, we'll check the windings, but it looks like a transformer is solid copper wire. So they're really heavy wires. And if we sneak into that, that's a definite pink. And this side, yep, that's copper as well. That's really good. Now they've got a lot of insulation on them, and I'm not sure how we're going to go getting that off. I'm not sure what the best way to dismantle it is. We could sell it as one large transformer. We might take it off the frame and see what it weighs first. Let's clean up this top piece first. I want these brass bolts out of here. And I think the handle assembly we might save for a future project. So we'll undo the handle nuts, which are pretty tight. So we're making pretty good progress at this stage. The frame here is clean, as in I've got everything off it that I want to. It could probably go as heavy steel because it's quite thick and it's relatively small. The top cover is actually like a hard plastic, and I may even hang on to that because if I'm making a project box or something, it might be a good front panel. So not wastage, I'll use that. The handles, as I said, I'll keep them, or the handle assembly, it'll be handy for something. Handy handle, yep, something like that. Now the transformer, we should be able to lift off that frame now because I don't think there's anything holding it there. So that's the next stage, and then we're going to work out exactly what we're going to do with the transformer. So I think I'll get it off there and I'll weigh it and see what it weighs. Oh, this centerpiece, I think, which adjusted the current, will just lift out. I don't know exactly how that works, but I think that's just heavy steel. Doesn't appear to be any copper or brass on that. Let's test it with a magnet. Yeah, it's all steel, so that can certainly just go in the heavy steel bin. Okay, let's see if we can get this beast off here. It's extremely heavy, and I'm thinking that it should just fall off. So there we go, one big welding transformer. I haven't seen any spiders as yet, so hopefully they're not in there. It's actually a piece of wood. There's a piece of wood top and bottom with its clamps, and then big coils of copper. Let's brush it off a bit and have a look. Okay, before I go any further, I'm actually going to try and weigh it. I'll have to find some other scales. I might sneak inside and grab the bathroom scales. I would like to know what it weighs. We need to make a decision on whether we're going to try and get the copper out of it, which means we've got to pull the laminations apart or cut them with a grinder. Maybe we could cut through the loops of copper and pull them all out the center. It's a fair bit of work, and then we've got to get the insulation off them. Now it's got some sort of hard paper type card fabric something or other. It's like a fabric. It's like a waxed fabric that's gone dry. But inside that, it looks like paper as well. Hang on, I'll go and get my knife. So here's a thinner piece that we chopped off earlier, and it's got an outer sleeve, which in a short piece will come off. So that's not going to strip very well, and the only way to get it off, I guess, would be to cut it into short lengths and slide it off. But underneath, it looks like it's got like a cotton, maybe paper insulation as well. So it takes a bit to get down to the copper. The other thing on these old ones is you never know if they use some sort of asbestos coating. I don't think they do, but sometimes you better be safe than sorry. So even though it would be some really nice copper, I could see this representing a lot of work to rescue the copper. I mean, it's super thick. Let's have a look at this piece. this piece is like probably almost 3/16 of an inch thick, but the insulation's also very thick. So look, it's beautiful copper. So it would certainly pay well if you could be bothered to clean it all up, but I don't know if I've got the time or the inclination to do it. So let's just weigh this transformer and see what it would work out as it is. Great news, guys. I found my old rusty bathroom scales. I think they're still reasonably accurate, and it saves me getting into trouble being caught with our good ones out here. So I've got the transformer on there. I couldn't lift it. I've just leant it to one side and kind of worked it on. It weighs, by the looks of that, it weighs pretty well exactly 30 kilos. So 30 kilograms in that transformer. Now, the scrapyards used to pay $1 a kilo when I was selling my transformers. They've dropped a little bit at the moment, but I think if we work on $1 a kilo, that's $30. One $30 transformer, which is probably all we would have got for this entire welder trying to sell it anyway. And I mentioned if it was aluminium at the start. Well, fortunate that it's copper because it weighs more. If it was an aluminium transformer, the scrapyards do buy transformers just as transformers. Now, they must be building in an allowance for the fact that there's a lot of aluminium windings in them these days, especially in microwaves and obviously welders. So you could still sell it as a transformer. It's just that if the windings were aluminium, the whole thing would weigh a lot less. Now that brings me to another little point of discussion. Should we get the copper out of it? Well, there would be a lot of work. We would have to work out how to get the insulation off, as I've just discussed before. What's an estimate of how much percentage of copper we'd get out of our 30 kilos? I reckon we would only be talking, say, percentage-wise, say 20% of the weight would be copper. Just an estimate, but we've got a lot of laminations here. We've also got 2 big chunks of wood, which are still attached. If we had 20% copper, that would be 20% of 30 would be about 6 kilos of nice clean copper. And even if it was 10 kilos, even if it was 30%, 10 kilos of nice clean copper would perhaps be worth about $100 with a lot of work. We're going to get $30 just as it is. I can get it off the bench. I can tick it off my list. I think I'm just going to do that. I don't think I'm going to scrap it out. I don't have a use for the copper. It's not like I do melting copper videos and pour things from copper. Some of the guys that do collect copper for melting, that's fine. I'm not going to. I'm going to sell that purely as a transformer and cash in my $30 when I eventually do another load to Melbourne. And if I was a bit undecided, well, I'm really decided now. I just stripped the insulation off these pieces I cut out to get the frame apart. And yes, it's lovely thick copper. It's beautiful copper, actually. But have a look at all the insulation. There's lots of fibrous powder floating around. I don't like that. I don't really want to wear a respirator or something, but I wouldn't want to breathe all that dust in while I'm trying to strip this. And as I said earlier, you don't really know what chemicals and compounds they use in these things to insulate it back in the day. So much better leaving it as is, in my view. I'm going to put these in a pile with as number 2 copper. We've got a couple of other bits somewhere. There's another terminal there. So we'll weigh up everything now. We'll work out what this welder is worth to me in parts, and we'll finish up the video. Okay guys, the wash up on this welder scrap out. Of course, we've got the notepad and we've got everything separated here on the table. Let's run through it. We have the heavy steel, which I have priced out. We have the pressing steel or the shred, which I'm just going to send out to the transfer station. The transformer is still sitting on the scales. A pair of wheels, which are pretty good solid wheels. They're solid rubber. The knobs, which may be useful to someone. A little bit of number 2 copper. A little bit of hardware, which includes the heavy brass nuts and bolts there, and a connector and a few other bits and pieces. The insulated copper wire, nice heavy stuff, and the actual handpiece plus quite a long lead in good condition, which I'm going to try and sell. And that sheet of vintage plastic I'm going to keep because it may be handy. I'm not writing down any value for that. The plug I chopped off the cord will just go in my e-waste bin. I don't pull the pins out of those. So our figures. At current scrap prices, October 2022 was the last prices I got. You can see the price of transformers is down a little. I was getting $1. So, but look, that's what we worked out at there. $34.70 worth of scrap metal in this welder. With really, it only probably took me an hour, maybe even a bit less, because I've been mucking around with the camera and everything. So not hard to get that sort of scrap value. If you did want to chase the copper out of the transformer, for sure you would get much better value, but it would take you a lot longer, and I'm not enthused to do that at all. A few extras here. If I was to sell the wheels, I'd probably ask $5 the pair. The knobs maybe $3. The actual handpiece and the lead, I could probably get more than that, but 10 would be a quick sell. Hardware, I just wrote down $1 because I do add all that to jars and I sell that. But if you weren't doing any of this, well, certainly the lead could have gone in with your insulated wire to increase that value. There was some brass in the handpiece as well. Of course, the hardware, those brass bolts and nuts would add to your scrap value too. So pretty good value. My total figure comes down to just over $53, and I'm sure I wouldn't have been able to sell the welder for that. So I'm pretty happy with that. And the only rubbish, the only landfill is some sweepings off the table, a little bit of electrical tape, and that stuff that I stripped off, those little bits of copper, that fibrous stuff. So virtually nothing going to the tip. Everything's going to be recycled or used. I did include this handle in the heavy steel, even though I won't actually send that for scrap. I'll keep that because it might be handy one day, you know the old saying. But all the other stuff is either useful or going for scrap metal. So thanks for coming along on this little journey with me, guys. Before you go, if one of you could just pop in and help me lift this transformer off the bench. It's very heavy and I don't want to hurt my shoulder. I'm happy with that. We got some good value. I've got something out of my other shed which I tripped over. So really good. It's continuing the quest to clean up, which is going to go for a long time. So I hope you guys are with me for the long haul. I'm going to take these few items to the shop that I'm going to sell. The rest of them are going in my scrap bins here. So yeah, another thing ticked off the list. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.